What's good, YouTube? Today, cut that. Oh, hey there, YouTube. Didn't see you there. No, I hate myself for that. How do you get started in a video? Yo, what's good, YouTube? Okay, fine. Yo, what's good, YouTube? Today is International Women's Day, and I wanted to make a video and dedicate it to, and not dedicate's the wrong word, I wanted to make a video about my Bubba. Dedicate is the wrong word because this is going to be a video just about my Bubba. Bubba was my grandmother. Speak about her in the past tense now because she died last year from cancer. And if you're someone that knows me, you know, if you're someone who's been a friend of mine over the last couple of years, you probably saw the updates and know that she was sick for a little while. She had stage 4 lung cancer for 9 months. And the doctors gave her 3 to 6. And she was like, I'll take 9. You know, that's just how she was. But so I wanted to make a video where I just kind of talk about Bubba. I miss her a lot. And I think about her not every day anymore. When she first died, I thought about her every day and was sad about it every day. And I would text my mom. This is my mom's mom. And I would text my mom and I would be like, man, I'm really, hurting today, or I'm really feeling bad today. And she would be like, I know, son, me too. And we would just kind of, in fact, when Bubba died, my mom and I got a little bit closer just from grieving together, because my mom is pretty young, and so the age gap between us isn't crazy. And so, we're both kind of in some ways like in a similar point of our life, and losing Bubba was like felt like losing a mom to me, and she lost her mom. And so we were, my actual mom and I were very, good together for that. It brought us together in grieving. But now that it's been, over 2 years now, since she died, it's weird to believe that it's been 2 years, but I don't think about it every day anymore. It's just become like a reality now that she's dead, and it's a thing that I know, it's a fact. Whereas before, I would literally forget that she had died. And even months after, 5, 6, 7 months after, I would go on an audition and I would leave the audition and I would think, I got a text, and then I would remember, oh, that's kind of fucked up. Like, my impulse was text Bubba. I can't because she died, and that would be the worst. Like, having the knowledge that someone that you love, someone that was very special to you, has died is hard, because you just know they're gone. But forgetting, or not being accustomed to, used to their being gone, and then remembering is the worst, because you have a feeling of guilt for forgetting that they're dead, and then it's like you're reliving their death over and over. You know what I mean? Every time that happens, you're like, oh, and it would make me just cry. I would just start crying, But now I don't think about her every single day. But when I do, I try not to let myself think about the sad things, there are things I remember her saying, or things I remember her doing, that if I will concentrate on those things, or if I relish those memories, I will cry. It's like an equation, you know what I mean? It's, think about this sad thought for X amount of time equals you will cry. So I try not to do that, because I don't want to be a masochist and, torture myself and make myself cry. So when I do think about her, if she comes up in my brain in a sad way, I try to pull it back and think of a funny thing or a sweet thing or something that'll make me smile instead of cry. Um, like right now, because I'm talking about her a lot, I feel it in my eyes that I kind of want to cry. But I don't want to make that kind of video because that's super annoying, and people who make videos of themselves crying, especially if you know you're gonna cry. If you start crying, whatever. If you know you're gonna cry and you make a video, like, come on. That feels a little attention grabby. I remember when I first found out that Bubba was sick. Um, she had a cold for pretty much the whole duration of winter. And every time I would talk to her, she would be, a little sniffly, and I'd be like, "You all good?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just can't get over this damn cold, this damn cough, or whatever." She was really chill about it. She didn't seem like a sick person. She just kind of seemed like someone who was sniffly a lot. And I was like, well, it's winter, and she's got allergies, and it could be a multitude of things. I didn't think too much about it. And then in 2016, in late March 2016, I had been dating this girl for about a year, and I really was invested in her and the relationship we had, and we broke up, and it was really tough. And I remember calling Bubba and just crying and being like, I don't know what to do. I'm really hurt. And I would call her like almost every day. And it so much it got to a point where she was just like, please stop calling me crying because it breaks my heart and I can't do anything for you. And I was like, okay. And I started to feel a little guilty because I knew that I was dumping a lot of like emotional, baggage, I guess. I just felt guilty because I was calling her so often and just crying, and I knew that she didn't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear someone call them crying over and over. And I started to feel a little guilty about it. And she was always good about it, though. You know what I mean? She was always Bubba was always sweet. She was always trying to give advice, even if it was, a 5-minute phone call, and she'd be like, "Well, supper's ready. Gotta go." And like, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but she always answered the call. She put up with me, and eventually I kind of stopped crying about it and moved on a little bit. But it wasn't long after that. So that was the end of March, basically April, and probably into May too. For a good month, I was just torn up and calling Bubba a lot and talking about my broken heart because it felt so dramatic. So I, in turn, acted very dramatic. And I remember in June, I was at a beer garden, not a place I normally hang out, but a friend of mine from Michigan named Elliot was visiting the city, visiting New York, and a couple friends of mine who also lived in New York who knew Elliot. We all decided to just meet up at this beer garden in Queens. So we're all hanging out, and it's a summer day in New York, which is the best. New York is awesome in the summer, and it's shitty petri dish in the winter, a frozen shitty petri dish, and that's what it feels like. Anyway, so we're chilling at this beer garden, and I get a text from my mom, and she's like, "Hey, I need you to call me." And I'm like, okay, this is not good. This is never a good thing. So I'm like, "Hey, excuse me," and I we're already outside, but I go further outside away from the table, and I take the call, and my mom says, because I knew Bubba she had been put in the hospital for pneumonia, and we were like, oh, that's why she can't get over her cough, because it's pneumonia, and there's like fluid in her lungs. That's not good. But I was like, people don't die from pneumonia normally. I mean, I guess you can, but it's not like, I wasn't scared she was gonna die. I was just like, oh, she'll be in the hospital for a couple days, and then she'll come home and she'll be fine. And she was texting me, and it didn't seem like anything had really changed. And so my mom calls and said, Bubba had another checkup today, and the doctor found spots on her lungs, and he thinks it's might be cancer. And I remember being like, let me talk to Bubba. And she was like, well, okay, fine. And then, like, my mom was, like, trying not to have me talk to Bubba, I think. But then I could hear Bubba in the background. And she was like, here, I'll talk. And she was like, hey, baby. That's how she always talked to me. The first thing she would say was, hey, baby. And see, like, that's a thing that makes me want to cry. And she just was saying, like, hey, it's fine. Like, it might not be cancer. It might be cancer. Who knows? And if it is, I'll get better. It's okay. Don't be sad. Don't freak out. It's just, we're just keeping you in the loop. We didn't want to hide it from you. And maybe there's, something, maybe I have cancer. And I, like, broke down and I was like, Bubba has cancer. Like, that's just how my mind is. I just assume the worst. It's a bad trait, but I don't know. I guess I've been conditioned to feel that way, I feel like in my life, usually if there's a good or a bad option, the bad one is the one that happens. So I was like, oh, great, Bubba has cancer. And I started crying, and I went back, and I told my friends, and they're like, oh, my God. And they all knew Bubba. That's the thing. Anyone who knew me before 2017, and maybe even afterwards, but if you knew me before then, you knew Bubba. You at least knew of her. I talked about her constantly. I told stories. I did impressions of her. I would call her. I would text her. Any friend that I had in South Carolina before I moved to New York, that's where I'm from, they met her. I had friends who would come over and they would spend the whole time, they would chill, because I lived with Bubba, they would chill with me, but they would eventually just kind of, forget me and just talk to Bubba. Seriously, people would come over to see Bubba. My friends, 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, when I was in college, they would come over and just hang out with Bubba. She was a fucking celebrity. And so my friends they were like, oh my God, dude, Bubba, no, like, that's not good, and she'll be fine. Like, everything you've ever told us about her, she's a strong woman, and I think old Southern women have got to be some of the strongest people in general, some of the strongest people in the world. And Bubba was, like, emotionally ripped, Like, if your emotional stability, your emotional strength could be represented physically, I mean, she would be, like, the mountain from Game of Thrones. She was that person. She just didn't really break down. Even when she wanted to cry, not that I think crying makes you weak, but I just mean she wouldn't allow herself, because I don't, but she wouldn't allow herself to get to a point of crying. She was always just strong-minded, and she would be like, okay, I feel this way, I'm going to power through it, I'm going to make this happen. That's just how she was. I did not get that from her. I wish I had, but I didn't. I got other things from her, but not that. And so she was like, yeah, maybe I have cancer, maybe I don't. Don't cry, don't get sad about it. We'll get through it. So my friends were like, well, listen, that sounds like, the Bubba that we know, so she's going to be fine. And then, a couple weeks later, I got a call, it definitely is cancer. A couple weeks later after that, it's stage 4B. Apparently there are letters to the numbers. So there's stage 1, 2, 3, 4, but then once you get to 4, you could be 4A or 4B. So she had stage 4B lung cancer. And when I was a kid, Bubba smoked, and she smoked, through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s. And then she quit, and she had stopped smoking for like a solid 10 years. Like all through my like late teens and into my 20s, she had stopped smoking. But the damage was already done, and decades of smoking caught up to her, and she had stage 4B lung cancer, and so she did chemo, and so she did 2 rounds of that and said, I'm not doing this anymore. And the doctor said that even through chemo, it was only going to extend her life by months, not years, months. So she was going to be miserable to maybe live a couple more months longer, and it just didn't make sense. So she stopped chemo. And at this point, it's probably like August or September, and we're just all kind of resolute in the fact that Bubba is going to die. And it quit being a timeline of when she could get over cancer, when she could be back to normal, and the timeline became, when will she just go away? And she surprisingly, once she stopped chemo, she was like, all right. She was on oxygen 24/7, which was sad to see her, um, like Darth Vader style with like this like thing up her nose and having to carry a oxygen tank. And she really didn't go outside much, only for doctor's visits and things. After she got sick, before she got sick, dude, Bubba and I used to go for walks in the park. We would walk a literal mile around this duck pond in South Carolina, in Anderson, where I'm from. And, she was like a trooper, no question. And I would just talk the whole time. I would just talk, 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 and she would listen. She would give advice. She would laugh at the silly things and tell me shut up when I was being annoying or complaining too much. And we just were like a little old married couple, and I loved that. I loved my, living with Bubba and having, she was my best friend too. And so it was sad to see her not be able to go for walks or to go to Belk's or Hamrick's or one of her stores that she liked shopping at. She couldn't do that anymore. She liked to shop. And she liked to occasionally have like Burger King, and it was a treat. She would cut coupons and have Burger King, and it was like that was like a treat for her, which is kind of funny. But she grew up in a different, she's a baby boomer, so she remembers when Burger King was invented, and so it's like, oh, that's like, ooh, we're gonna have that new thing. Whereas me, I'm like, Burger King. Anyhow, I'm derailed. So I watched her kind of be like under house arrest, but she was still pretty, all things considered, pretty okay. She still talked. My mom and I remember one time my mom and I were at Bubba's, and we were cooking something. I don't remember. And we were cooking something. I don't remember what we were cooking. And apparently my mom did it wrong. She put something on the wrong rack or something, and Bubba came like flying around the corner, and my mom was like, what the hell are you doing? No, get out of here. And she's like, no, give it to me. You don't know what you're doing. Never put anything on the bottom rack. Always put it on the top rack. I remember that. And my mom was just like, she has cancer, and she's running around the house taking things out of my hands. And it's just like, that is so Bubba. Like, she's literally dying, but yet she's still gonna like push you away and be like, you don't know what you're doing. Very much a Bubba thing. So yeah, she kind of like held on for a long time. She lived a lot longer than doctors said she would. And she really wasn't even that sick, at least from what I saw. And I wasn't living with her at this point. I was living in New York, but I was going home every month. I remember telling my bosses, hey, my grandmother has cancer, and they were like, hey, do what you need to do. Like, go home as much as you need. So I was literally like every month I would leave for like 5 days. And then I would leave on like a Thursday and come back on a Tuesday, something like that. Because I would get the weekend, and my mom would be off work too. And, it just worked out to have those days. So I did that every week for 7 months or so. And it wasn't until so when I was there, maybe it was just because I was home and she was showing strength for me, but when I was home I never really saw her looking that sick, other than the oxygen, you know what I mean? She was still talkative, still moving around, still joked, She was still joking. And then, towards the end, like right before she died, I did start to see her, she was sleeping a lot. And when we would talk on the phone, she would say things like, I can't talk but for a minute, because she would run out of oxygen. She just couldn't talk because her lungs were just failing her. And so talking takes a lot of air, and she couldn't do it. And I remember, this is a sad thing. I remember I was at work at a restaurant in Brooklyn, and I had just finished my shift. It was a brunch shift, so it was like 4 p.m., and I had a text that said call me from her, so I called her, and I was like, hey, you okay? And she answered the phone. She was like, hey, baby, and we talked for a couple minutes, and then she said, towards the end, she said, this will be the last time you talk to me. And having that realization was really sad, and it was especially sad because I wasn't with her. because I was in New York and she was down south, but she knew that she was going to die. Like, she felt that she was going to die soon, and so she wanted to talk to me one more time. That was really tough to know that you're having your last conversation. I can't remember anything we talked about that call. You know, all I remember is that it was the last call, the last time we talked. And we texted a little bit after that because she was a texter, Bubba text. She was cool, and you know, a little bit here and there, and then it just kind of, you know, she quit texting, and then I remember, again, I was at the restaurant in Brooklyn, and this time it was a night shift. It was, you know, 11 p.m. or 11:30 p.m. And I finished my shift, and I got my phone, and I had a text from my mom that said, call me, and I thought, oh, I bet I know what this is. And so I called my mom, and she said she's gone. And even though you know, even if you know someone is going to die, when they die, it kills you. It doesn't soften it, really. Maybe a little. I guess I can't say that for sure because I don't know what it would have been like if she hadn't been sick for a while, if she had just had a car accident or something. I don't know, but it's still crushed. It's still crushed. And luckily there was a girl that was working who's a really good friend of mine, and she like sat with me, and I just like sat in the middle of this empty restaurant, and you know, the manager came by and checked on me, and she was sweet about it, and my friend just kind of like sat there with her hand on my shoulder, and I just like cried in this empty restaurant in Brooklyn. And then I took the F train to the N train, and I went back to Queens, and it was just like, okay, so all right, my life is still going. And you know, a couple days later, I went home and went to the funeral and saw my family, and you know, I was pretty good through the visitation. And I had one moment where I remember, like, I saw my friend Dalton and my friend Noah and their wives, and I just lost it, and I just started crying, and you know, they were all there, and they were like, you know, keeping me composed, and like, you know, laying hands on me, which I needed. And then at the actual funeral the next day, I remember it was at the very end, like my second cousin, who's a cancer survivor himself, he led this long prayer, and I was kind of like, all right, all right, let's wrap it up, you know. This is sweet, but let's, you know, I want to go. This is sad. I don't want to be here. And we got through it, and everybody was leaving. We were walking to the car, and I just lost it. I just started weeping. And I remember my grandfather, who came up to me, and he put his arm around me and said, well, I'm still here, and your mom's still here, and, you know, you're still here. And then later he got cancer and died too. That's another video. And I, you know, trying to cheer me up. And then my second cousin, who led this long prayer, he just held me. I just like literally was crying, and I'm like a foot taller than this guy. He's a shorter fella. And I remember I just like was like laying my head on his shoulder like a movie or something. I just was bawling. And Bubba really, this guy's name is Marty, and Bubba really liked Marty a lot. So, you know, he felt it too. It was his aunt. You know, and you could just feel how much everyone loved her and how everyone was really hurt. You know, she left a huge impact in a lot of people. She wasn't a like a small personality. Like, if you knew Bubba, she made a way into your heart, and man, it was like being ripped open when she died. I remember being a kid, and one of my favorite things to do was sit on the floor, and Bubba would always make me put a towel on the floor if I was going to sit on the floor. And I would color or I would paint or use markers. Like I just was a very like drawy type kid. A very like I was into coloring, I was into drawing, I was into puzzles, and I liked making my own puzzles, and I would write my own books, kid books, silly little things. And I would sit right under her feet. She would be sitting on the couch watching TV or doing a crossword or reading a book or something, and I would be adjacent to her, a foot away, maybe not even, just on the floor on my towel coloring. And every couple of minutes, I would look up to her and be like, "Look at this! How's this? Look what I did." And she never blew me off. Other people blew me off when I would do stuff like that. They'd be like, "Okay, that's cool. Okay, go to your room." That kind of thing. Or like, "You're 25. Why do you still do this?" Whatever. Bubba never did. Always was like, "Oh, I like that. Oh, that's really cool. Maybe try this." Just was always encouraging. I remember those things. I remember making my own puzzles where I would just take pieces of paper. It's not even a puzzle. I just would cut pieces of paper and then try to put them back together. And she would be like, "Yeah, let's do a puzzle." And so she would sit on the floor and help me with these shreds of paper, and we would just rebuild the paper. I would like color little pieces and be like, "Oh, I remember the red touches the blue," Super encouraging. I had these Ninja Turtle toys that would, this is when I'm like pretty little, like, maybe even preschool age. And I had these Ninja Turtles that had marbles in their belly, and if you push this button in the back, they'd shoot the marbles out. And I would make up games where, like, you have to shoot the marble into this target, or you have to, like, golf, or you have to knock each other down with the marbles, whatever. She would play these games with me. I had Batman toys. She would play with Batman. I had Power Ranger toys. We would just be playing these things. Bubba always played with me. I loved my grandfather, but he didn't want to play those kinds of games. He wanted to like have me sit in his lap and watch a baseball game. And I did a lot of that, but I was rambunctious. And so I would watch, two batters, and then I would be like, "No, I want to play." And so he'd be like, "All right, we'll go play." Bubba would be like, "Okay, let's go play," and she would run into the kitchen with me, and I had this tricycle, and I would just ride it in circles. And I remember I remember hearing the story. I don't actually remember, but I remember when I grew up, I would pause with my grandfather, I called him Paz, would always say, when he was little, why did you let him ride that tricycle around in circles? That drove me nuts. It gave me a headache. And she would say, "Because it wasn't hurting anything. Because he liked it." That's how Bubba was with me. She would just drink a cup of coffee and read a book while I ran in circles, and she would just literally around a table. I would do it 100 times. I do remember doing it, and then I would like go down the hall and come back and do a bunch of circles. And because I was a very like fidgety kid, I had a lot of energy, and she would just let me run it out. And she'd be like, "Well, he needs to get it out somehow." I'd run out in the yard. We'd play on the swing set. I just, it's like this weird image of like a Lifetime movie or something with like a little kid like pulling someone behind, like, "Come on, come on." That was Bubba. Always. So when I got a little bit older, my interests changed. She was supportive. I remember being like 15, 16 years old, and I started doing plays, started doing the theater. And Bubba was like, "Cool, let's go see these plays." And she went to every single play I did. Then I decided I wanted to be an actor and do it as my profession, and I wanted to study it in college. And I remember my family kind of being like, "I thought you wanted to be a teacher. Like, we're not saying we don't want you to do this thing, but I thought you wanted to be a history teacher because you said that like 2 years ago." And I was like, "Yeah, I thought I wanted to do that, but now what I've always really wanted to do is be an actor. I just thought I had to pick a real career, but now I think acting can't be a real career." And Bubba was like, "Okay, cool. Go be an actor. Like, go study it in college." I mean, she just always believed in me. I could do no wrong with her. When I was nine, I think, maybe I was 10. I was a 10 and under baseball, and I was a shitty batter. I got better, but when I was 10, that was like my worst year of any sport ever. I just couldn't hit the goddamn ball. I just couldn't hit it. It was sad. And You know, there's probably a ton of excuses I could make. That's not what this video is about. I wore glasses, but I didn't wear my glasses to baseball. I'm pretty sure that's probably where the problem came from. Because I could do everything else, but I couldn't hit the damn ball anyway. So Bubba started bribing me in a sweet, cute way, not in like a, you know, shady, under the table government way. She bought me Pokemon cards and Digimon cards and all the things that a kid in 2000 or 1999 or whenever it was, like, Pokemon, Digimon, like, this is what I want. This is currency to me. A holographic Charizard card is a $100 bill. And so she was like, if you hit the ball, I'll give you a pack of cards. Just hit it. Tip it. Foul it behind you. Just swing it and like graze the ball and I'll give you a pack. And I couldn't do it. I either walked or struck out or got hit like every at bat. I didn't get singles or doubles or anything. I didn't even fly out. I just got out. And so she was like, I'll give you 5 packs, I'll give you 10 packs. And then I finally hit the ball like 3 times the whole year. One of the times we were playing a team that one of my best friends was on, and he caught the ball, so I was out. You know, that's the rule of the sport. If they catch the ball, you're out. And my friend Zach Heron, shout out to Zach Heron, he caught the ball, and I remember being like so upset, but also just like really happy because I hit the ball kind of far. And for me at least, and she was like, here's like 100 pack of cards, even though you didn't even get a hit, you got out, but here's 100 packs because you just touched the ball. That's how Bubba was. She was encouraging, she was supportive, her heart was with my heart. Whatever I wanted, she wanted it. You know what I mean? And when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I moved back in with Bubba, because I was in college and I just didn't want to live on campus because it was going to be extra money and I didn't want to take out loans. So I just moved in with my grandmother and she was like, yeah. So we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and because she had divorced my grandfather, wasn't living in that house anymore. She would get, you know, sore at me, mostly for just, she would say, running my smart mouth, which is true. That's always been my crux. If I get in trouble, it's because of something I said, most likely. Because I don't really, never was like a kid who did bad things, you know. I wasn't like a hitting kid, or I didn't throw tantrums. I would just say shit. And sometimes I would just, you know, maybe be a little jerk. Anywho, I don't know. I think about her a lot. I miss her. I miss razzing her. She'd watch the same episode of Judge Judy 5 times and not realize she had already seen it. And then I would be like, you've seen this episode? And she'd be like, I haven't. And I would say, yes, you have. And she would say, no, I have not. And I'd say, Bubba, I don't watch Judge Judy unless I'm sitting in the living room with you, and I have seen this episode. I didn't watch this on my own time. I've seen this episode because you have seen this episode. And she'd be like, no, the hell I haven't. And I'd be like, this one is, you know, and I would talk about the episode, and she'd be like, I haven't seen this one. And then I would look at her and I'd be like, she knows she's seen it. She realized she'd seen it, but she won't let up. She's not that kind of woman. She didn't back down. I also loved razzing her about eating dinner at 4 p.m., which was some crazy shit. She just didn't eat. She wouldn't eat breakfast. She would have a light lunch, like 1 piece of lettuce at like 12, and then at 4 o'clock it was dinner. And then she would get, not mad, but she would roll her eyes at me if at 8 or 9 o'clock I would be hungry. She'd be like, you just eat so much. You just always hungry. And I'd be like, because we ate 5 hours ago. Like, what do you want? Like, I'm not you. I don't eat 1 meal a day. And so I would always, you know, razz her for eating so early. I don't know. I miss those funny things. She never dyed her hair. I have more gray hair than Bubba did. That's a fucking fact. She never dyed her hair. She had a head full of brown hair. And everyone, like all the old ladies her age, thought she was lying. They all just thought, oh, Dale dyes her hair and she won't tell anybody. She just really didn't. She just never went gray. Which is kind of crazy because I got some of her genetics and I'm graying like so much in my sideburns. Anywho, I just miss her. And she was a very strong woman. She was definitely the matriarch of our family, no question. My mom was 50 years old, or almost 50 years old, and still like calling Bubba, asking like, how do I do this? How do I do that? Bubba was. We all went to Bubba. Anybody who had a problem, even her ex-husband, my grandfather, whom I loved a lot, and I miss him a lot too. He would call her and be like, Dale, how do I do this? She did everything. If it was a bill, she knew. She paid it to, knew who to pay it to, when to pay it, on what day. She had everything. She had an actual checkbook, and I would watch her sit down and balance it. I definitely learned a lot about money, and I'm pretty frugal, and a lot of that is because of Bubba. One kind of sweet thing, right before she died, she left me some inheritance, and she told me, spend this money. Like, she said to me, don't just save this money, like, use this money to make you happy, because I want this, because it's my money going to you, and I want to be able to make you happy. These are like things she's thinking as she's dying, that's where her heart was. She wanted to make my mom's life better. She wanted to make my life better. Whoever else. She would buy toys for random kids for Christmas. She was just that kind of person. The best person, the most special person I've ever had in my life. My mom would say the same. Like, Bubba was not just my special person, but my mom's special person, and probably other people's too, and I just didn't know about it, or at least other people thought she was incredibly special. I do know that. And yeah, I wish she were here, but she's not. But I think about her, and I try to do things that I think would make her proud, and when I do things that I think wouldn't make her proud, I like shame myself for it, and I think, oh, what would Bubba do, it's instead of what would Jesus do, it's what would Bubba do, or what would Bubba say about this. He would be like, boy, you damn idiot, or whatever, Or when I do great things, and she would be like, I'm so proud of you, my darling, Anyway, maybe there's a special person, maybe a woman, as it's International Women's Day, who you should call, or you should recognize as being this person for you, Not everybody gets to have a Bubba. I'm lucky for that, and I know that. But yeah, maybe there's a Bubba in your life, and if she's still around, you should cherish that, for sure. I cherished Bubba before she died. I just did. But if I had known she was going to die so young, because she was only 72, I would have cherished her even more. So, anywho.